Welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast. My name is Dan Hamilton. Really excited to be here with Mae Potter, the Director of Engineering Operations at Dell. Molly, thanks for being here today.
I'm really excited to talk about the state of veterans in Texas with you.
Thank you. The second episode here, we look forward to talking a little bit about your career in tech, your career at Dell, but give us a little bit of background on how you got to where you are now.
So I consider myself an incredibly lucky lady. I landed a job at Dell here in Austin, Texas. I'm currently the Director of Engineering Operations for a fantastic global team producing world-class products here in Texas. But I landed this job after having really struggled to find a job when I got out of the Air Force in 2014. I was a flight test engineer in Las Vegas, but I had suffered some injuries while I was in Afghanistan in 2010 from a blast, and that really kind of crushed my dreams of being an astronaut, which is the path that I was on as a flight test engineer in the Air Force. But landing here in Texas and in Austin and working for Dell has really afforded me some incredible opportunities I probably never would have gotten, actually, if I'd stayed in the military. One of those being Miss Veteran America 2016.
Absolutely.
Which is something that a lot of people hear and go, that's a thing?
Yeah,
that's a thing? Yeah, it is. And it's an incredible opportunity to be a strong voice for women veterans across the country. The other thing is I've been able to really become embedded in my community. For the first time since I left home at 18 years old from North Carolina, small town North Carolina, I actually feel like I'm home because I have connected.
It's a good feeling, isn't it?
It's an amazing feeling. I come to Austin and Austin is home. And I think that's because being a veteran here and being embedded with the veteran community has made me closer to my community as a whole, which makes it feel like home.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thanks for that background. Let me ask you this. You talked about how embedded you are in the veterans community here in Texas. You're obviously leading at a high level with Dell. So you see a lot of the ins and outs of veterans here, their transition and their path after service. What do you think the state of Texas veterans is?
That's a really great question. And I feel like in the news these days, you hear a lot of the negative stories about veterans.
Yes.
We're struggling with suicide. We're struggling with mental health issues.
Depression,
we're struggling with
anxiety,
finding jobs.
Yeah.
But there's another side of it that I see, and that is that the veterans in the state of Texas, I believe, and I see as the spark, the ember for wonderful momentum and things in the veteran community for the rest of the country. I see us as the spark in entrepreneurship. And actually the term veteranpreneurship is used a lot. And there's a lot of that here in Austin and in San Antonio, in Houston and Dallas and across the state. When it comes to world-class veteran service organizations, I see the spark starting here and being the model for some of the best-in-class veteran service organizations across the country. Some of those being Make a Vet Sweat. I see this Operation Supply Drop, just really incredible things happening. I also see Texas as the spark for when it comes to veterans getting back into the community, getting involved in politics, and standing up and being the voice. So veterans finally saying, you're not going to be the voice of other veterans unless you are a veteran, and really running for office and taking on that challenge and taking it on head on, and really seeing that now move through the rest of the country.
I think that's really interesting because that's a conversation that we had just several days ago. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to? I think were your words that we are the hero of our own story, right? Can you tell us a little? I'm not sure if I got the phrase right.
Did.
Can you tell us about that?
And I use this a lot, especially with women veterans. That we are the heroes of our own stories, and we don't need to be saved. And while I feel like there's so much effort going on with government and other civilian organizations, maybe trying to pull veteran hiring in, Amazon, Dell saying we're going to hire how many ever thousands of veterans, and other organizations saying we're going to provide mental health services to veterans, that's great. But at the same time, no one's going to advocate for a veteran like another veteran. And so I feel like the real success stories are when you have veterans embedded in those organizations and are the real, like really leading the fight on this and becoming really the ones that are pulling this together to make our own stories a success.
So the fact that you are where you are in your career obviously is a testament to your character and your hard work, but if you are the hero of your own story, let me start that over. So you are definitely a testament to character and hard work over a long period of time. What would you tell another young woman who is coming out of the armed forces? She hears that line, "You are the hero of your own story." What would be the message that you would like to tell her?
I think that's a really great kickoff into also the work I did with Miss Veteran America.
Yeah.
So right now, the fastest growing demographic of homelessness in the United States are homeless women veterans.
Okay.
And one of the biggest reasons for that is because when you're a woman in the military, you don't ask for help.
Sure.
It's seen as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And
says, "I can do it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Just keep going."
Right.
That sort of
hard
mantra,
enough.
right? Yeah.
It's hard enough being a woman in the military sometimes, and you don't want to be seen as weak. They don't teach us how to be damsels in distress.
Distress, right.
And so to be your own hero, you need to reach out to other women veterans, and you need to ask for help, and you need to network, and you need to make sure that if you feel like you're getting in a place that's dangerous for you, where you feel like you're not going to have a job, where you don't know where to go next, find another woman veteran, and she's going to help mentor and guide you. A big part of my success and my story is because I had other women veterans advocating on my behalf.
That was actually going to be my next question is, can you tell us and can you tell the audience a little bit about maybe if people see you from the outside and like, oh, she was Miss Veteran America, man, she must have it all together, but you're also telling people along that trajectory to get to where you are today. Yeah. At some point, somebody had to give you a helping hand, either in business or in the veterans community. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe when you stumbled or you weren't where you wanted to be and how you continued to progress?
Yeah, actually, so as much as I would like to attribute my success to just hard work and gritting it through, me just gritting it through sometimes in my toughest times actually got me lower. And
that's an excellent point. You don't often think about it like that.
Yeah, right. And the prime example of that is when after my deployment in 2010, after my injuries, and then trying to go back into the fighter pilot community, essentially. Right. I was a flight test engineer, but I was with the best pilots in the world, and I was struggling with a lot of mental health issues, sleepless nights, obsessive compulsive disorder. I felt like I was losing control over my mind because I just had night terrors. I started obsessively and compulsively exercising to the point where I was actually anorexic. Right. I wasn't sleeping. All the telltale signs of PTSD.
Right.
I pushed my family away. I pushed my friends away, and I said, "I'm going to do this on my own. I'll just bear through it, and I'll get through it." And I broke. Yeah. I broke. I couldn't do it anymore. And I had a fantastic commander at the time that realized that I needed that support. But he called in my mother, who's another woman veteran. My mom's an Army veteran. Yeah. And
you come from a great line
I do, of military veterans.
Yep.
And so it took another woman veteran, my mother, working with my commander to say, Molly needs help. I actually ended up in inpatient mental health. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for PTSD therapy. And that was really hard. But it took that, and it took a really strong support system, and people believed in me getting better and advocating on my behalf. When I couldn't advocate on my own, they were there for me.
So I think one of the struggles that veterans have when they get out after the military is specifically what you just said, which is, I'm going to overcome this. I'm just going to keep fighting through it. But then just like a truck in the mud, it just gets deeper and deeper. At what point were you able to show yourself grace and a little bit of mercy? Like, when did it go from, man, I'm just going to keep pushing, to like, hey, I need some help. I need to slow down. I need to think about this. I need to have a little bit of grace with myself because I'm not the person that I wanted to be. What do you think changed that mentality?
I think it was I had built up so many defense mechanisms, and my walls had become so thick that they were no longer effective. So my performance was no longer able to maintain. My body was no longer to actually physically keep up. There's a fantastic book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's by a gentleman that's been studying trauma, especially in combat veterans, for over 30 years. And he talks about how trauma and all of this mentality of not asking for help and not being kind to yourself as far as giving yourself some grace to get better and to admit that you need support starts to physically manifest itself. And for me, I start to actually have physical issues. And that's when I realized I really couldn't do it any longer.
So I experienced something similar when I was in University of Texas, and I had this almost like light bulb moment that I just wasn't becoming the person that I wanted to be. I wasn't the Dan that I thought I could be, you know? And it was kind of in that moment where I realized that, one, I had to go find a community of people. Two, I had to go ask for help. And three, I think similar to your circumstances, that learning process, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just a learning process.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's something that you were able to apply later in life, maybe at work or in other circumstances, but the ability, I think, for veterans to change their thinking from, I'm just going to push my way through this, to actually having to say, I might need to stop, I might need to get some support, and then I can continue, is something that's not talked a lot, I don't think, in the veterans community.
It isn't, and also in business. So as I've transitioned to Dell, I now have the humility to ask for feedback. And when I can't figure something out, I have people that report to me, and I go to them and go, I don't know what's going on here, and I need your help. And there's nothing more empowering to the people that you work with than to actually feel like they have a stake in the game, right? And that they're really being an influencer as well. So it brings your team closer, but it also gives you that backup that you need. And it also helps you become stronger as well. And so by knowing that when I go into a room, I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I don't want to ever be the smartest person in the room, I think that is something that I have carried over from my road to recovery from some mental health issues with the military, my struggle to find a job, and to finally ask for help to find a job, and then once I got into that job, to really be humble to go, you know what? These guys have been working in this environment for a very long time, and I am new to this game. I may have incredible experience when it comes to leadership, what the military is, but that's very different than what it's like at Dell. And I need to find a mentor. I need to ask for help. And three, I need to ask the stupid questions, because I might actually not know what I think I know.
So in asking those questions and sitting down with a mentor, do you think there is a trait or a lesson learned that you've, for say, put in your toolbox that you didn't have when you were in the military?
Yeah, I actually, this segues really great to some feedback I got from my boss last week.
Okay.
He pulled me into the office and he said, Molly, we got to talk. I went, okay, great. At this point, I like feedback. If someone's telling me that something's going wrong, I want to hear it now. And he said, you're very direct. I said, well, yeah. He's like, that worked in the military, didn't it? Yeah, it worked great in the military. He said, well, I want to let you know that some people that might work for you now don't work well with you saying, go do this, and then you walking away. They need to be led along a little bit more. You may have been used to in your past having to say, Dan, I need you to go do X, Y, and Z, and you're like,
Roger,
got it.
I'll go do that.
I'm done. And then you come back and you tell me when it's done. It's like, you need to soften your edges when it comes to how direct you are, and then you need to work a little bit more on actually bringing people along with you and what your expectation management is with that. And so I think that is something that just very recently is even a great learning. It's as I'm working to become a leader in the corporate environment, I'm still really relying on mentors and that feedback that I now humbly ask for in order to make me a better leader going forward.
Okay, so you've told me a little bit about the feedback that maybe in the corporate environment you've received that you didn't have as a veteran, or a trait that you didn't have. But can you tell us a little bit about a trait that you learned in the service that you feel like you've been able to convey either to your peers or the people that you're leading?
Tell the truth. Don't try to hide it. Always tell you, if something is going wrong and it's not a good news story, tell your boss sooner than later. Make sure they find out from you and say, I don't have a solution right now, but I want to let you know that this is not right and something's going on and we're working on it. And I will come back to you with a solution. But I'm not going to let this linger, and I want you to know about it now. And I think because of that, I've gained a lot of respect in the area that I'm in with engineering business operations. So a lot of it has to do with money, it has to do with resources and how we're conducting operations. And if I see something that's about to break 3 weeks down the line, I want my boss and his boss to know now, and that I'm working on it, rather than for him to find out a month later when we're in a rut and I didn't ask for his help when I really needed it. So that if I have to come back to him a few days later and say, we messed up here, I need resources, but I'm fixing it before it gets too bad. And really being open and honest about, I get it, I messed up, I'm going to take ownership for it, but I wanted you to know first.
What would you say was a point in your career after the military where you felt as equally content with the job that you were doing as you did when you were in the Air Force?
Yeah. Actually, I just had a moment like that right before we started this interview. And
I'm happy to hear that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're here sharing your story.
So we're sitting here and we're setting up, and I'm on my phone over here in the corner. And there's a young gentleman from Russia who came to the U.S. To go to school and get his MBA and really to live the American dream.
Yeah.
And he's always wanted to work in marketing, and he's a big gamer. And he got this job with Dell, and he's been working for me, but that's not really where his skill set is, and it's not really where his passion is. And we've been working with him and developing his career so that he could go and get his dream job. And he just texted me that the gaming guys at Dell just offered him his dream marketing job. And it's the people development and seeing people achieve the things that they really want to do. I mean, we're talking about a guy that came from a small town in Russia, worked his way hard through school, just like people in the military work their way hard through the military, do the jobs they don't want to do, to get that dream of what they really want to do in the end and work hard for it. And those are the days that I feel really fulfilled. And the fact that this young man is now going to be going on to his next career
is you played a big role in that, right?
And we really worked on this, and it wasn't a fun journey, but we got there. And today he got the email that said, congratulations.
Wow. Hey, that's a big success. That's a great way to go into the weekend for sure. Let me ask you this. Now that you are the Director of Engineering Operations at Dell, what would you have told yourself before getting out of the military?
Not only be patient. Jobs just don't come out of the blue. But you are not as qualified for things that you think you might be qualified for. I thought, you know what? I led people in the military. I led massive programs, billion-dollar test efforts. Oh, I could totally be a director at Dell. You know, let me apply to all of these senior executive
You're shooting
jobs,
for the top, right?
Shooting for the top, I have an engineering background. Oh, yeah, I can apply for this really specialized engineering job over here. And I'm not hearing anything back. Why am I not hearing anything back? And I'm having to tell my friends that are now transitioning out, and a lot of them are majors or lieutenant colonels, and they're going straight for that director job. I'm like, how many days have you led a corporate team? Just how many days in your entire career? 0. Okay, I get that you just came from squadron command. That's great, but that does not translate into a director here, here, and here. And to be a little bit humble, and that you may have to take a step back, and you're transitioning and you're starting in a whole new world sometimes. And it could be a whole separate language as well that you've got to learn. And it's fun. It's exciting, especially if you really like a challenging environment and starting all over again at 30 or 40.
So you went through something similar to that. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I kind of wanted to hear how did you go about almost, if you lose the excitement of being around jets and being in the Air Force and being deployed, how does the corporate environment match that same excitement or enthusiasm, or does it match it in a different way that you were comfortable almost trading one for the other?
I get people that ask me that all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, aren't you bored here at Dell? And I'm like, not at all, because you think of the glory days of being in the military, but you know what? Those days when it was a wind chill of minus 17 degrees on the flight line at 3 a.m., and I would finish my flight at 5 a.m. and I would brief till 8 a.m. and then I'd start my 12-hour day. Don't miss that. That's not glorious.
Yes, It's kind of nice getting up in the morning and making a cup of coffee and maybe hanging out with your spouse for a little bit.
I love having a dog. When I was in the military, I couldn't have a dog. I couldn't have a dog because I didn't know when I was going to come home.
Right.
And I love the fact that now I can travel wherever I want without having to put it on a security clearance form. I have 3 dogs.
There you go.
And
that sounds like heaven, right?
Yeah, and I just work with the greatest people. And, when I was in the military, I was working on programs that have a 20, 30-year development cycle. What I'm developing now are fun, fast-paced products that switch every year. We're doing something different. And that's just really fun and cool to me, to watch Spider-Man on the big screen and go, I worked on that laptop, that's right
awesome.
there. To me, that's really cool. And
you get to see it from growth to, to where it is. You get to see it from beginning to end almost.
And I can talk about what I do.
You don't have that experience when, to your point about in the military, if you're working on a project that's going to be a 40-year project.
Or it's top secret.
Right.
You come home at the end of the day and someone says, so what'd you do at work today? Well, I had a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
Now I can tell people what I do. And that's a lot of fun.
There is a different sense of fulfillment from the career world, from business, I think from the corporate side of things, and it's different than being in the military. But I think a lot of veterans, and I'd be interested to know if you've heard this, kind of narrative from veterans, is they just don't think it's going to be enjoyable, or they're a little concerned about getting out because they don't think that they will find the same fulfillment.
Yeah, and the military does a really great job of making you think that once you leave, you're never going to be as successful. That, that you have this ownership of rank, you have this ownership of your career field and this camaraderie and community that you've built. And when you leave,
you lose it.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for veterans to realize that there's a whole world out there.
Yeah.
And there's other communities. And you don't lose your sense of self unless you purposely lose your sense of self. I'm Molly. I'm definitely an Air Force veteran. I'm definitely a leader of women veterans, and I freaking own it. And I am not wearing a uniform, and I still feel like I have an amazing community. I have a lot of thrills at work. I get to do some really cool travel, meet with really neat people, and it's just a second chapter in my life.
Yes.
But I didn't let that transition lose me. Those experiences, I still had them, but they are not going to define the rest of my life as well.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really hard to understand that at your mid-20s or early 30s because those, at least for myself, those were the most pertinent and vivid memories that I had. And it took me a long time. And I think for people who are listening and watching, it's really important to develop new memories and to develop positive memories after you left the service. And that's obviously something that you did when you left, once you got into school and once you found your first job, you started to develop some personal memories and actually starting to enjoy. life after service?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is life after service was I needed to do a lot of self-travel. And so my most positive memory after service, especially the immediate years following, was the amount of travel I did. And I had always wanted to reach all the continents before I turned 30, and I did that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's incredible.
And so that was something that was really important to me. And that's a really positive memory, to think that I wouldn't have had the time or the effort or even the financial ability to do that while I was in the service. And I did that afterwards. And then I met my spouse after I was in the service. And 4.5 months ago, I gave birth to a little girl.
Congratulations.
You know, so this is Molly, the next generation. I still have these really wonderful memories of being in the service, but I think the fact that I didn't focus on that past, and then I started
looking to the future.
It's looking towards the future, and also just still being me and not letting that uniform define my entire life that I have to live.
So you talked about traveling all the continents. And how impactful that was for you. Tell us a little bit about the travel that you do in work, and how your service in the military impacts what happens, in meetings on different continents. Yeah,
so working in engineering in Dell, I work with a really global team, and a lot of them are in Asia. And I love going to Taiwan. It's an absolute paradise. It's this great little tropical island. And then I've gone to China several times as well, which is something that my role in the military I never would have been able to experience. But being in the military, and especially being in Afghanistan and working with our allied partners, and then also working with the locals in Afghanistan, you really have to be fluid in how you deal with different cultures, right? So that's
very different from, like the military culture, right? Where everyone kind of fits into a mold. You actually learned almost something different. You actually learned that there are different cultures because of your service overseas, and then you applied that lesson to being in Asia, if I'm understanding it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the post 9/11 generation, you're going to find a lot more of that. We spend a lot more time in the Middle East. We spend a lot more time in Africa, in South America. And so for me, I'm able to go to Asia in a very different culture where I can't read any signs. I don't read Mandarin. I don't speak Mandarin. And to feel comfortable walking down the street, I'm not afraid. It doesn't scare me. I get off the plane. I have no idea, where I'm at or what to do.
What is up or down or left or right?
You figure it out. You figure it out comfortably. I feel comfortable exploring and then really taking in those cultures. And that translates to better business practices, because I'm not scared when I go into a meeting and I know I'm the only one that speaks English as a first language. And I've learned how to respectfully ask for people to repeat themselves or to maybe explain in a different manner. I've also learned that I'm in their world. They're not in my world.
Sure.
When I'm handed a business card in Shanghai, I don't just put it in my pocket and go. That's considered incredible disrespect, that you grab it with both hands, and you take good care of it. And that's something that I think the military really taught me to be successful at, is know the environment you're going into and to be able to adapt to that, and to be able to appreciate the differences that aren't necessarily what it's like back in
Austin, Texas.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about, we touched on it very, very briefly, but your parents' service and how that has impacted maybe not just your military service, but maybe your career at Dell.
Yeah, so both of my parents are Army veterans, and they were Vietnam-era veterans, and they got a call in the middle of the night while they were stationed in Okinawa from UNC Chapel Hill and said, hey, we would like for you to come to our nursing program. Specifically to be one of the first classes of rural nurse practitioners. And they said, all right. So they left the military. They went to med school on the Montgomery GI Bill at that point in time. They both graduated with zero debt, were able to buy a house very early on in their 30s, so they had that core and that financial stability. And that financial stability, because they weren't paying off student loan debts, and because they were able to make more money in their careers because they had gone back to school on the GI Bill, meant that they were able to save for my brother and I for college. So I went to college without any debt because my parents were able to afford it. And then I went into the military and I didn't have any debt. I did my master's while I was in the military, so I actually had the military pay for my master's. I got out, I had the post 9/11 GI Bill. I went back to school at UT.
You're a glutton for punishment, it sounds like.
But at the same time, the reason I went back to Macomb's School of Business to get a master's in business there is because my boss said, Molly, you are an engineer, you have a master's in engineering, but in order to get promoted and really to compete, to keep going up, you need better business acumen, and you're competing with MBAs. So I went back, I got my MBA, I graduated, and a month later I got promoted. And I have zero debt, and I'm making more money, which means that I'm able to help financially support my daughter's future so that she won't.
For the future
so
generations.
It's a really generational because of that stemming from service.
That talks that story really reminds me of something that really hit home for me when we were in boot camp, and this is kind of the entire. It really encompasses the Voices of Veterans podcast mentality that veterans can be successful. Is that I remember sitting down talking with somebody in boot camp. He said, I'm joining the military because I'm looking to get a leg up. I'm looking to get, and in that story of your parents saying, they joined the service, they used the GI Bill, and that was the foundation that they had.
Yes.
And, I hope through the conversation that we've had today, that people can hear your story, your parents' story, and really kind of use that path, the foundation that they've set in the service, and go pursue whether it's a corporate job or whether it's a degree, and continue to keep learning and continue to keep leading in their communities, because it's extremely valuable. Yeah,
it is. And I also feel like it leaves a legacy of service. So my parents always taught my brother and I that you don't have to go into the military. They never ever pushed it, actually. I decided on my own. But they were always really big on you need to give back to your community. And that has a generational effect as well. My grandfather was in the service and served during World War II, which gave that spark to my mother and to my aunt, who then gave that spark to me and my brother. My brother's a volunteer firefighter, and he's actually a nurse as well. And he's an incredible linchpin in our local community. And then it kind of gave me that desire to keep serving as well. So it's not just about education and socioeconomic gains and a leg up. It's really also about a leg up in the communities that you become entrenched in.
Yeah, and one of the things that I try to tell veterans, and I come in contact with them, is, hey, people want you in their communities. They want you to serve. They want you to lead. And I know you talked a little bit about the struggles that you faced, either getting into school or finding your first job. But once you get there and once you kind of break down that door, I think at least the experiences I've had, if people want veterans in their business, they want them in the workplace, they have extraordinary experiences that you have talked about today, that I'm sure the people at Dell are just extremely proud to have somebody of your caliber, an Air Force veteran, in their business, working on a day-to-day basis. I think you're a tremendous example for veterans all across Texas. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. Any last words? Is there anything that you would like to leave with the audience today?
I think when people hear my story, they go, wow, you're a success. But I want people to realize that I'm not an exception. When it comes to the caliber of veterans that are in Texas, this is almost the standard. We are the tip of the spear, and that we have a lot to give back to our community. And again, we're the heroes of our own story, and we don't always need to be saved. So thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much for being here. Actually, can I ask you one more thing? If we can follow you on social media, where can our audience hear more about what you're doing going forward?
Yeah, so I keep a very active Twitter page at Miss Vet America 16. You're also more than welcome to follow the Miss Veteran America social media pages, and it will keep you up to date on all the happenings for women veterans, and even just military in general and ongoings across the country. So
excellent.
Thanks, Dan.
Molly, thank you so much
Appreciate
for
it.
being here. Thank you for telling us your story. This is the conclusion of episode 2 of the Voices of Veterans podcast. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush at the Veterans Land Board, we will talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.